The Galactic fleet had finally done it. After years of endless conflict, the united forces of dozens of alien species had brought the war to its final, crushing conclusion. Humanity, a once proud race that had dared challenge the might of the galaxy, was now nothing more than a fading memory. Their colonies had fallen, their warships reduced to scrap, and their survivors scattered and broken. Earth itself, once the heart of human civilization, had been all but abandoned, its surface ravaged by the relentless campaigns of the fleet. For the commanders of the Galactic fleet, the war's conclusion was nothing short of a triumph. At the Galactic summit, the leaders of the allied species gathered, their faces beaming with pride as they declared victory. Their fleets, unmatched in strength and technology, had wiped out the last remnants of humanity's resistance. The war was over. The galaxy could now return to peace, or so they thought. Today, Fleet Commander Zathok of the Viric species declared, standing tall before a massive holographic projection of the galaxy's stars, "We celebrate not just victory, but the end of an era. The human threat is no more. The balance of the galaxy has been restored, and the peace we have fought for is now ours to protect." His words were met with cheers from the assembled diplomats and military officers, the air thick with relief and joy. For so long, humanity had been a thorn in the side of galactic peace. Their unexpected resilience, their tendency to fight against impossible odds, had kept the fleet on its toes, but now the threat was extinguished. "We will finally rebuild," said High Chancellor Elira of the Gallian Confederacy, her voice smooth and measured. "The remnants of humanity are scattered, their once glorious empire shattered. Our victory today is the result of our superior technology, our unity, and our determination. It was never a fair fight, and now it's over." The fleet commanders exchanged smiles, content in the knowledge that the human race would no longer be a problem. They had underestimated humanity's potential for defiance many times during the war, but now, with their fleets shattered and Earth under control, they believed the problem was solved. However, there was one thing they didn't know. The last remaining humans, the few survivors who had been able to hide away, were not ready to surrender. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, hidden away in underground bunkers that had not seen the light of day in centuries, a small group of human engineers and military strategists were working furiously. The echoes of war might have been all but silent to the rest of the galaxy, but to them, it had only intensified. In these forgotten chambers, Earth's final weapon, its last hope, was being awakened. The Dreadnoughts. These enormous ships, ancient and powerful, were designed long before the fleet's rise to dominance. They had been buried underground, hidden away as humanity's secret weapon, waiting for the day when they might be needed most. The fleet had never known they existed, and now, as they celebrated their victory, Earth was preparing to strike back with a force the galaxy had never seen. The engineers worked tirelessly, knowing the stakes. Each decision, every adjustment, could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. With each passing hour, the power cores of the Dreadnoughts hummed to life, sending waves of energy through their vast frames. These weren't just warships. They were the culmination of humanity's ingenuity, designed to be capable of turning the tide of the entire war. For the rest of the galaxy, peace seemed imminent, but in the deepest shadows of Earth, the human spirit was far from defeated. While the Galactic fleet celebrated their victory across the galaxy, Earth's surviving leaders and engineers were working in complete secrecy, aware that the very survival of the human race rested on the success of their final mission. Hidden far beneath the surface of Earth's ravaged continents, in underground bunkers untouched by the chaos above, a small, specialized team of military officers and engineers scrambled to activate what had been humanity's last resort: the Dreadnoughts. The massive chambers, buried deep in the planet's crust, hummed with the faint sound of machinery in motion. The air was thick with tension, every member of the crew aware that if they failed, humanity's fate would be sealed. The bunkers, once thought to be abandoned relics of an ancient war, were now the center of humanity's last hope for survival. The team worked tirelessly, monitoring the systems that had been dormant for centuries, ensuring the Dreadnoughts were ready for activation. The Dreadnoughts were not just ordinary warships. They were behemoths, each one larger than any ship the Galactic fleet had ever seen. Built long before the fleet's rise to power, they were crafted using technology that was a mix of forgotten Earth science and ancient alien knowledge, an amalgamation of weapons and engineering so advanced that it had been abandoned in favor of more conventional modern warfare. Humanity had used these ships as a safeguard against a time of complete annihilation, a final measure if all else failed. And now, that time had come. In the command center, General Marcus Hale, a grizzled veteran of the war, stood watching the engineers work. His face was grim, the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders heavy enough to crush most men. He had seen the destruction of human colonies, the death of millions, and the loss of Earth's great cities. But as he looked at the monitors before him, the sight of the Dreadnoughts powering up gave him a strange sense of hope. These were humanity's last chance. If they succeeded, the fleet would face a force unlike anything they had ever imagined. "General, the power cores are at full capacity," said Lieutenant Elijah Wren, a young engineer whose family had perished during the initial stages of the war. She kept her voice steady, but the strain was clear in her eyes. "We're ready to activate the main systems. The Dreadnoughts are online." Marcus nodded, though he didn't feel a surge of triumph. It was too soon to celebrate. The fleet might have believed they had destroyed humanity, but they were about to be proven wrong. "Do it," he said, his voice firm. Across the bunkers, a series of switches were flipped, and a powerful surge of energy coursed through the deep tunnels. The Dreadnoughts, enormous and silent in their slumber, began to stir. Massive engines hummed to life as the once dormant warships slowly awakened. The ground trembled as they rumbled, their enormous frames shifting, shaking off centuries of silence. It was a sight no one had ever thought they would witness, a fleet of Earth's finest, capable of taking on the entire galaxy, now rising from the shadows. Outside, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the smog-ridden skies of Earth. But instead of shining on a broken world, they now illuminated a fleet of warships, the last defenders of humanity. The Dreadnoughts, towering above the landscape, began to ascend slowly from their hidden bases. The engineers and military commanders watched as their creations lifted into the atmosphere, their massive shapes dwarfing anything that had flown before. "Status report," Marcus said, his voice calm but edged with anticipation. "We're clear for takeoff," Lieutenant Wren replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "The ships are stable. The first Dreadnought is moving toward the launch zone." "Good. Set course for the outer rim," Marcus ordered. "We'll give them a taste of what they've been too arrogant to understand." The Dreadnoughts slowly broke free from Earth's atmosphere, their engines blasting with the raw power of forgotten technology. They were far from perfect, crude in many ways compared to the smooth, sleek ships of the Galactic fleet, but they had something that the fleet's ships didn't: the raw might of humanity's ingenuity, determination, and desperation. Humanity was far from beaten. They had one final chance to make their mark on the galaxy. As the Dreadnoughts cut through space, a cold silence filled the command center. No one spoke. They knew that the moment they entered the Galactic theater, the balance of power would shift. The fleet thought they had won, but in that silence, a new chapter of the war was about to be written. And Earth's Dreadnoughts, once thought lost to time, would make sure the galaxy would never forget the name of humanity. The sky above Earth had never felt so silent, even as the first Dreadnought broke free from its underground lair. For centuries, the ship had lain dormant, its massive hull covered by layers of dirt and stone, hidden from the prying eyes of any satellite or sensor. Now, as it slowly rose through the atmosphere, the sheer scale of the ship became apparent, its jagged edges and imposing frame dwarfing anything in the fleet's records. The Dreadnought was a relic, a colossal remnant of an ancient time when humanity had believed itself secure. Now it was humanity's final weapon. Inside the command center, General Marcus Hale stood watching the live feed, his hands clasped behind his back. He felt the weight of the moment, as if the fate of every human who had suffered and died during the war was riding on this single launch. The vastness of space stretched out before them, the looming dreadnought preparing to tear a hole in the calm and quiet galaxy that had long believed humanity was finished. Lieutenant Wren was at her console, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. First dreadnought cleared the atmosphere. General. Second ship ready for launch. Marcus didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the colossal craft as it soared upward, a reminder of the strength humanity still possessed. His thoughts flashed back to the desperate battles fought on Earth's surface, the burning cities, and the cries of those who had given their lives for this one chance to survive. "Prepare the second dreadnought. We move out as soon as possible," he finally said, his voice steady but taut. The second dreadnought, smaller than the first, but still more powerful than anything the fleet had encountered, began its ascent shortly after, its engines roaring to life. The air around it shimmered with the force of its propulsion, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. The very fabric of space seemed to tremble as humanity's answer to the galactic fleet ascended into the void. Far from Earth, in the cold vacuum of space, the first dreadnought had already broken through Earth's outer layers, its immense form casting a shadow over the moon. Its launch was undetected by the galactic fleet, still busy celebrating what they thought was the final victory. The dreadnoughts had remained hidden so long, their technology so outdated compared to the fleet's advanced weapons, that no one could have imagined they were even in existence. The first sign of danger came not in a warning, but in a blip on the galactic sensors, so small it was dismissed as interference. Yet as the second dreadnought followed, the blips grew larger, stronger, and more distinct. The fleet's advanced monitoring systems, designed to track the movements of every fleet in the galaxy, finally registered a force unlike any they had encountered. At the fleet's central command hub, Commander Zathok of the Varic species studied the screen, his brow furrowing as he traced the strange readings. He had no idea what it was, some sort of anomaly, perhaps. "Send a fleet to investigate," he ordered, his voice clipped. "I want answers." But it was too late. Before his order could be fully processed, the dreadnoughts began their approach in earnest, closing in on the fleet's borders. Back on Earth, as the third dreadnought prepared for its own launch, General Hale and his team watched the galaxy's response unfold. "We're not going to be ignored this time," he muttered, half to himself. He had always believed Earth's will to survive would find a way. And now that belief was being realized in full force. The ships were no longer just weapons. They were symbols of humanity's refusal to fade into obscurity. The dreadnoughts had been dormant for so long that no one had realized the sheer scale of their potential. Their weapon systems were ancient, but powerful beyond measure. The crew on board had retrofitted the ships with the most advanced tech humanity had left, giving them the power to obliterate anything in their path. They were relics of the past, yes, but they were also humanity's last card, and it was now being played. As the first dreadnought reached the edge of the galactic border, a terrifying truth began to sink in. Earth had not only survived, it had returned. The fleet, so sure of its victory, now faced the terrifying unknown. The galactic fleet, celebrating what they believed to be their hard-won victory over humanity, had no idea what was coming. Their commanders and fleet officers were still basking in their perceived triumph when the first disturbance appeared on their radar, a flickering signal, barely registering, as if it were a glitch. Moments passed, and then a larger signature began to form. "What is that?" Commander Zathok growled, studying the display. The anomaly had grown from a faint whisper into a solid pulse. He leaned in, his sharp eyes scanning the readings. "No, it can't be. It's impossible." The strange readings didn't belong to any known species, and it was far too large to be a rogue ship. Zathok's eyes darted across the room, his mind racing. His second-in-command, Captain Virex, rushed forward. "Commander, the object is approaching the outer edge of our territory. Its trajectory is unmistakable. It's coming straight for us," Virex said, voice filled with disbelief. "Impossible," Zathok repeated, his voice tight. "We've wiped them out. There's nothing left of humanity." But even as he spoke, the data on the screen shifted. What had seemed like an anomaly moments before was now unmistakable. A massive fleet of warships, the likes of which the Galactic fleet had never seen, was headed directly toward them. The truth hit like a physical blow. Humanity was alive. On Earth, General Marcus Hale watched the Galactic transmissions unfold on his secure channels, a mixture of dread and determination creeping into his chest. His team had done everything they could to keep the Dreadnoughts hidden, to keep their existence a secret. But now, as the ships breached the outer limits of human space and advanced toward the Galactic fleet's borders, the moment of reckoning was at hand. There was no turning back. "I knew they wouldn't be prepared," Marcus muttered under his breath. "But I didn't expect them to be this arrogant." The fleet commanders in the Galactic Coalition were still caught in the throes of their own disbelief when the first dreadnought, now fully operational, transmitted a clear message across the galaxy. The signal came through a universal frequency that no ship in the galaxy could ignore. "Humanity is not gone," the voice crackled through the transmission. It was crisp, cold, and unmistakable. It was a voice every species in the galaxy would recognize, even if they had long since forgotten it. "I am General Marcus Hale, leader of Earth's last remaining forces. We are returning. Prepare yourselves for what you've underestimated." The message was brief, but the weight of it reverberated across the galaxy. The Dreadnoughts, like silent titans, advanced through the void, their colossal forms dwarfing anything in the Galactic fleet's inventory. These ships, armed with weapons beyond the fleet's wildest imagination, were now fully revealed. The Alliance was not ready. Humanity had returned, and its vengeance was as inevitable as the dark void of space itself. In the Galactic fleet's command center, Zathok stood frozen in disbelief, his mind struggling to process the reality of the situation. A small fleet of ships, a handful compared to the massive armadas of the Galactic fleet, had appeared seemingly from nowhere, and their message was clear. Humanity was alive. They weren't just alive, either. They were coming for revenge. "We need to send word to the High Council," Zathok finally ordered, his voice strained. He snapped to Virex. "Alert the fleet. We need to mobilize everything we've got. This is no rogue faction. It's humanity. And they are coming for us." But it was already too late. The Dreadnoughts had engaged their faster-than-light drives, sending them streaking toward the fleet's borders, moving far faster than their original designs had suggested possible. The fleet's best sensors tracked them, but the readings were incomprehensible. The ships didn't move like anything they had encountered before. The Dreadnoughts didn't just fly in straight lines. They seemed to bend space itself, warping the fabric of reality in ways that should have been impossible. By the time the Galactic fleet could assemble a proper response, the first dreadnought was already within firing range. Its weapons, long dormant and left untouched for centuries, surged with raw, untamed power. A massive energy cannon built into its bow flared to life, and before anyone could react, it unleashed its first salvo, a burst of pure destructive energy. The explosion that followed ripped through the fabric of space, tearing apart the first defensive line of the Galactic fleet. Ships, once thought indestructible, were torn apart in an instant. The shockwave was felt across the entire system, sending alarms ringing on every fleet vessel in the vicinity. For the Galactic fleet, the party was over. The first dreadnought's devastating strike had shattered the Galactic fleet's confidence like glass. The full force of the fleet's military might was now on the defensive, its once proud armada reeling from the unexpected assault. The galactic shockwaves that had rippled through the space station were only a small indication of what was to come. As the first of many energy blasts detonated across the fleet's battle group, panic set in, and the battle turned from a victory celebration into a desperate struggle for survival. Commander Zathok stared at the readings, his heart pounding. His forces, once thought invincible, were losing ground to this unexpected threat. The Dreadnoughts' weapons, powered by a mix of forgotten Earth technology and untapped ingenuity, were ripping through his fleet with terrifying efficiency. "Return fire," Zathok barked, though his voice carried none of the confidence it once had. "Deploy all available ships. I want every vessel ready to engage. We're not losing this battle." But the Dreadnoughts were more than just powerful. There was something else about them that the fleet had never anticipated. Coordination. The humans weren't simply sending their ships into space like the chaotic tactics they had used in the earlier stages of the war. No, this was different. They were working together with the precision of a master chess player, each ship moving as though guided by a single mind. The Dreadnoughts, massive and seemingly unyielding, weaved through the galaxy with deadly intent. The second Dreadnought opened fire just as the first one began to reload, unleashing a barrage of energy projectiles that sliced through enemy ships like a hot knife through butter. The Galactic fleet's pride, their superior technology and weaponry, was being undone by the very thing they had underestimated: human resolve. One by one, the fleet's defensive lines buckled under the weight of the assault. Ships with advanced energy shields, capable of withstanding the harshest conditions of space, were shredded by the ancient weapons of Earth's dreadnoughts. The shields flared, then collapsed, unable to absorb the devastating blasts. Meanwhile, the dreadnoughts moved with frightening ease, targeting weak points in the enemy fleet with precision. A group of smaller alien ships attempted to flank the dreadnoughts, hoping to catch them off guard, but the dreadnoughts' weapons systems responded in milliseconds. Turrets mounted on the ship's sides erupted in streams of energy that tore through the attackers before they could even retreat. "Regroup. Form the defensive formation," Zathok commanded, his voice frantic now. He could feel the situation slipping from his grasp. "We need reinforcements. Send out a distress signal to the other sectors." But the dreadnoughts were relentless. They were everywhere. The entire sector was now under attack, and the fleet's reinforcements were still hours away. Even worse, the humans had proven to be much more than just survivors. They were predators now. The dreadnoughts' weapons weren't just advanced. They were deadly beyond imagination. As Zathok's fleet regrouped and attempted to push back, the dreadnoughts showed no signs of retreating. Their movements were calculated, tactical, and devastating. Each shot from their energy cannons seemed to erase entire ships from existence. It wasn't just the power of their weapons, it was the relentless determination behind them. The humans weren't fighting for a victory, they were fighting for revenge. The massive explosion from the dreadnought's main cannon continued to ripple across the battlefield, sending shockwaves through the space-time continuum. Zathok's flagship, the Vikor, a vessel that had withstood countless battles, was now caught in the blast radius. It shuddered, the hull groaning under the strain, and suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. Impact in 30 seconds. Shields at 20%. His engineer shouted, eyes wide with panic. "We can't take another hit, Commander." Zathok felt a cold sweat form on his brow. The Vikor wasn't just another ship. It was his symbol of power, his pride. To lose it to a handful of ancient ships from a species he thought extinct was unthinkable. "Deploy all remaining fighters. We need to retaliate now," Zathok roared. His voice, however, lacked the confidence it once had. It wasn't just a fight against ships now. It was a fight against an overwhelming force that had returned to reclaim its place in the galaxy. Across the battlefield, the dreadnoughts remained calm, undeterred by the attacks that had only begun to intensify. The humans, it seemed, had learned something from their long years of struggle: survival. And now, as the fleet's remaining ships scrambled to respond, It was humanity's turn to show the galaxy what it had forgotten. With each passing second, the Dreadnoughts' weapons continued to wreak havoc, reducing the Galactic fleet's forces to smoldering ruins. The battle had just begun, and the fleet's victory was slipping away, piece by piece. The battle raged on, and the gap between the Galactic fleet's once unshakable dominance and humanity's unexpected return continued to widen. On every side, the Dreadnoughts pushed forward relentlessly, each ship now operating with the precision of a well-rehearsed military operation. No longer were they just mere weapons of destruction. They were symbols of human ingenuity, powered by centuries of conflict, desperation, and resilience. Back on the command deck of the Vikor, Commander Zathok's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. His fleet, which had once dominated entire star systems, was now being systematically dismantled. His screens blinked red as the reports came in from every quadrant. Ship after ship was being destroyed. The fighters launched to confront the Dreadnoughts had been easily overwhelmed. Their weapons were too small, too weak to pierce the Dreadnoughts' reinforced hulls or their advanced shields. The Vikor had sustained significant damage, its shields flickering in and out as another barrage of fire rocked the ship. It was only a matter of time before the ship would no longer be able to withstand the onslaught. Zathok knew that the rest of the fleet wasn't far behind in terms of devastation. "Reinforcements are still a light year away," shouted Virex, his voice barely audible over the shrieking alarms. He glanced at Zathok, his eyes wide with terror. "We need a strategy, something to counter their firepower. If we don't, we'll lose everything." Zathok clenched his fists, his mind racing. There had to be something. His fleet had been built to conquer worlds, to intimidate even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Yet, here they were, struggling against these ancient human dreadnoughts. "They're coordinated," Zathok muttered under his breath. "Too coordinated to be a mere coincidence. It's like they've been preparing for this, preparing to fight us specifically." He turned, facing Virex with grim determination. "We can't wait for reinforcements. We need to hit them before they get any closer." In the vastness of space, the Dreadnoughts continued their unrelenting assault. Energy beams ripped through the fleet's formation, tearing holes in ships and disintegrating them in the blink of an eye. Each Dreadnought fired with deadly accuracy, their systems clearly optimized for maximum devastation. Meanwhile, General Marcus Hale stood aboard his flagship, observing the galactic battle through the viewports. He felt a chill as he watched the devastation unfold. The fleet was trying to fight back, but it was clear that their efforts were futile. Humanity had arrived, and there was no turning back. "They're breaking, General," Lieutenant Wren reported, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding before her. "The fleet's forces are in full retreat. They're losing ships at an alarming rate. The second wave of dreadnoughts is just about to engage." Hale nodded, though his expression remained stoic. He didn't feel relief. Not yet. The destruction of the fleet was only part of the battle. The real war, he knew, had yet to be fought. But for now, humanity had gained the upper hand. It was time to make sure the Galactic fleet never underestimated Earth again. "We need to send a message," Hale said, his voice unwavering. "Not just to Zathok and his fleet, but to the whole galaxy. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to reclaim what was taken from us." Back in the heart of the battle, Zathok watched as another dreadnought moved into position. The Vikor was struggling, its hull cracked and its systems failing, but the commander was far from ready to admit defeat. He barked orders to his crew, desperate to find some way to retaliate, but each attempt was met with disaster. Suddenly, a new voice echoed through his communication console. It was crisp, cold, and unmistakable. "Commander Zathok, this is General Marcus Hale of Earth. You've lost," the voice declared, reverberating across the comms channel. Zathok's heart skipped a beat. The audacity of the humans to make direct contact in the midst of such destruction. But the truth was undeniable. They were right. "I gave your fleet a chance to leave. Now you have two options: surrender or face the full might of humanity. If you continue to fight, you will be erased. We've waited long enough to deliver this message, Commander. Zathok's fists clenched as he listened to the ultimatum. He could hear the confidence in Hale's voice, the coldness that cut through the airwaves. But it was more than just confidence. It was a promise. "No," Zathok replied, his voice laced with defiance. "You may have taken the first move, human, but you will not destroy us. You underestimate the Galactic fleet. We will fight until the very last ship is standing." Hale's response was immediate, his voice unwavering. "We'll see." As the V-Corps moved to engage once again, the Dreadnoughts closed in, preparing for a final, decisive strike. Zathok's forces were exhausted, the remaining ships scattered and vulnerable. They had underestimated humanity's strength. But now it was too late. The turning tide of battle was clear. The Galactic fleet was on the verge of collapse. The void of space had become a battlefield unlike any other in history. The once mighty Galactic fleet, the pinnacle of 1,000 species' combined technology and power, was now on the brink of collapse. The Dreadnoughts, Earth's ancient behemoths, had cut through their defenses like a hot knife through butter, and the fleet's remaining ships were scattered, broken, and desperate. The sense of inevitability hung heavy in the cold silence of space. General Marcus Hale stood at the heart of his flagship, Freedom's Call, watching the unfolding destruction of the fleet on the view screen. The human fleet, though smaller in number, was relentless. The Dreadnoughts were more than just ships. They were symbols of a people who had been cast aside and forgotten, yet had endured and now risen from the ashes. The damage to the Galactic fleet was catastrophic. Vessels that once boasted impenetrable shields and advanced weaponry were now nothing more than wreckage floating in space. The remaining fighters had no chance against the barrage of energy beams from the Dreadnoughts. The loss was unimaginable, yet the humans pushed forward, unyielding. "Sir," Lieutenant Wren's voice interrupted Hale's thoughts. "We've received a communication from Commander Zathok. He's refusing to surrender, even after all this." Hale looked up, his gaze cold and unblinking. "Send him a reply. Let him know what awaits his fleet if they don't stand down. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to reclaim what's ours." Wren nodded and relayed the message, while Hale turned back to the view screen, watching the last remnants of the Galactic fleet attempting to regroup. Zathok, despite his arrogance and defiance, had no idea what he was up against. Earth had been pushed to the edge for too long, and now it was time for vengeance. Meanwhile, aboard the V-Corps, Zathok was struggling with the reality of his situation. His once proud flagship was a shadow of its former self, its shields barely holding together as the Dreadnoughts continued their relentless assault. The bridge was a chaos of flashing red alarms, crew members scrambling to keep the ship intact. Zathok, however, stood still, his jaw clenched, eyes burning with fury and resolve. "We can still fight," he shouted, though the words rang hollow. His ship had taken a beating, its engines barely functioning, and the remaining fleet was scattered in disarray. "Continue evasive maneuvers. We will not be destroyed like this. We can rally." But deep down, Zathok knew the truth. The tide of battle had turned. His forces were exhausted, and their morale was shattered. Humanity's weapons, designed with an ancient vengeance, were unlike anything he had encountered. He had underestimated them, and now his empire was on the verge of collapse. Virex, his second in command, approached him cautiously. "Commander, the humans have destroyed over half of our fleet. We can't hold out much longer. We need to surrender or we'll be annihilated." Zathok's eyes flashed with anger, but the desperation in Virex's voice made him pause. He could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him. There was no more escaping the inevitable. It was a choice he had never imagined he'd have to make. "I won't surrender," Zathok replied, his voice steady, but laced with a dark determination. "Not until every ship is lost. We will fight until the last. We are the Galactic fleet. We do not kneel to anyone. Virex didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He had seen the writing on the wall long ago. The Vicor was a shadow of its former self, and the Galactic fleet was now a mere relic of its former power. Back in the heart of the conflict, the Dreadnoughts pressed forward, unwavering. The final phase of the battle had begun. Earth's forces, fueled by the bitter knowledge of their past sufferings, showed no mercy. As the remaining Galactic fleet ships scattered, attempting to regroup, the Dreadnoughts' energy beams decimated their ranks one by one. There would be no escape. The once proud Vicor, flagship of the Galactic fleet, was now caught in the Dreadnoughts' crosshairs. Its broken hull shuddered as the final barrage of energy struck its core. The ship's defenses faltered, unable to withstand the might of Earth's vengeance. One last explosion rocked the Vicor, sending debris scattering through space. Zathok, on the command deck, held on for dear life as the ship's hull buckled beneath him. He had fought with everything he had, but in the end, it wasn't enough. The ship was lost. The fleet was lost. "Commander, the Vicor is finished," Virex reported, his voice hollow. "It's over." Zathok didn't respond. He stood in silence, staring out at the final moments of his flagship's destruction. The ship, his pride, was crumbling, and with it, the empire he had fought to protect. There would be no victory here, only defeat. Back aboard Freedom's Call, General Hale watched the final destruction of the Vicor unfold on his screen. The battle was all but won. The Galactic fleet had been decimated, their pride shattered, and Earth's vengeance was finally complete. The last remnants of the fleet's forces had no choice but to scatter, their morale shattered beyond repair. "We've won," Ren said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and relief. "It's over." Hale's gaze was hard, unflinching. "It's not over yet. Not until the galaxy understands that humanity is no longer something to be overlooked or forgotten. They will learn our name, and they will remember what happens when they think they can crush us." The silence of space was deafening. The once proud Galactic fleet, a conglomerate of the most powerful forces the galaxy had ever known, had been reduced to debris and ashes. Zathok's flagship, the Vicor, was no more than a twisted wreck floating amidst the shattered remnants of his fleet. The Dreadnoughts, Earth's ancient engines of destruction, had crushed everything in their path, leaving behind a galaxy forever altered. General Marcus Hale stood on the bridge of Freedom's Call, staring out into the void. The battle was won, but it wasn't the triumph he had imagined. It had been a necessary victory, one driven by vengeance and the need for survival, but as the fleet of human dreadnoughts floated in the silence, Hale couldn't shake the heavy weight of what had been lost, and what had yet to come. "We did it, sir," Lieutenant Wren said, her voice filled with awe as she stood beside him. "We've avenged Earth." Hale nodded, his face stone cold. "Yes, we've avenged Earth. But this is just the beginning." The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The Galactic fleet was shattered, but their influence extended throughout the galaxy. With their fall, new powers would rise, and the rest of the galaxy would now be forced to reckon with humanity. The Dreadnoughts had shown Earth's might, but it was clear that Earth's place in the galaxy was far from secure. "All remaining fleet commanders are reporting in," Wren continued, reviewing her console. "They're requesting guidance on next steps. What should we do now?" Hale looked at the ships on the screen. An array of dreadnoughts, heavy cruisers, and countless smaller vessels, each a symbol of humanity's long-awaited return. He had led them to victory, but now he needed to lead them to the future. "Establish a communications link with the remaining Galactic Council factions," Hale ordered, his voice firm. "We will not be ignored. Let them know that humanity is not just a survivor. We are now a force to be reckoned with." Back at the heart of the destroyed fleet, Zathok sat in the remnants of the Vicor, his hands resting on a console, staring at the final reports. His empire was gone. His people were scattered. His forces had been obliterated. The thought of surrendering was a bitter pill, one he had never considered in his entire career. But now, there was no choice. Virex stood beside him, her face pale, her uniform singed from the ongoing fires. "Commander, what do we do now?" Zathok's voice was low, almost a whisper. "We survive. We rebuild. The fleet may be gone, but we are not. The galaxy will remember this day, and we will return." It was the only solace Zathok could offer. His dream of domination had been crushed beneath the weight of Earth's vengeance, but Zathok was not a fool. He knew that while the galactic fleet had fallen, the power dynamics in the galaxy would shift. The remnants of the galactic fleet, those scattered and broken, would regroup, but Earth would never again be ignored. "We will rise again," Zathok muttered, his eyes narrowing. "And when we do, we will make sure humanity understands the true cost of their victory." Across the galaxy, the message had already begun to spread. The news of the galactic fleet's fall was rippling outward, reverberating through the stars. The galaxy's long-standing powers, the trade alliances, and the smaller empires, all watched in shock and awe as humanity's dreadnoughts claimed victory over the most powerful military force the universe had known. The galaxy was now aware of Earth's might. Humanity was no longer the forgotten species. No longer would they be relegated to the fringes of history. And it wasn't just the fleet's defeat that sent waves through the galaxy. It was the way the humans had fought. They had risen from the ashes, bringing with them the raw determination of a species that had survived centuries of oppression. They fought not just for survival, but for a message. Earth would no longer be forgotten. Humanity would no longer be underestimated. At the heart of it all, General Marcus Hale stood resolute, aware of the road ahead. The victory was not just in their defeat of the galactic fleet. It was in the legacy they had forged, one that would echo through the stars. "We've made our mark," Hale said, his voice somber but resolute. "Now we show them that humanity does not bow. We shape the future, and the galaxy will remember our name." The dreadnoughts, those immense engines of war, began to shift position, their powerful engines pushing them into formation as they left the ruins of the galactic fleet behind. The stars shimmered around them, and in the distance, the faintest glimmers of new alliances and wars began to take form. The galaxy had been shaken, and the balance of power was forever changed. Humanity, once a forgotten species, had carved its place among the stars. But as the dreadnoughts turned toward the galaxy's next challenge, it became clear. This was just the beginning of a new chapter. The rise of Earth had begun, and with it, a new era for the galaxy.